this paperback edition of Little Bo Peep and the Monster of Loch Ness by Angela Goldsmith. One day Little Bo Peep, bored of watching her sheep, declared, "I will go for a swim in Loch Ness." And without a second look, she threw down her crook, and was soon in her swimming dress. She walked down to the edge, and there made a pledge to swim towards the middle of the loch. "But you just cannot go," said a well-meaning crow. "Bo, you just cannot abandon your flock." But Bo gave a loud sigh, and she would not reply. She merely waved goodbye to her sheep. They stood in a row to watch their friend go, and Hugo tried hard not to weep. And as Bo said goodbye, her sheep tried not to cry, but they would miss her all the same. Goodbye Doyle and Hugo, Elliot, Austin, Bob, and Poe, said Bo as she called to each of them by name. "You must grease yourself with butter," said a friendly otter, who arrived just in time to watch the commotion. "A layer spread thin will help to protect your skin better than any lotion." And so, with much palaver, the sheep helped Bo to lather herself with the gooey gunge. It took a long while, and in the end, she smelt really quite vile. But now, Bo was ready to take the plunge. The crow shook his head, and repeated all that he said about the dangers of her trip. But Bo put her hands on her hips, and just pouted her lips, and decided to give him the slip. No, Bo would not listen. And how the water did glisten as she untied her shoes on a rock. She dived in the pool where the water was cool, and she turned bright blue with a shock. But after some time, she thought the water divine, and soon got used to the chill. So, Bo splashed about, but she gave a great shout when she encountered a gull with a yellow bill. "You must turn back, Miss Bo Peep. The water here is murky and deep," said the gull with a tone of warning. But Bo dismissed the cry, at first with a sigh, and then by rolling her eyes and yawning. "I tell you the truth, this water's uncouth," said the gull, trying to offer some aid. "I will not go back to the shore. You are just being a bore," said Bo, who was hard to dissuade. So, Bo swam out far and wide, racing against the high tide, and soon saw a frog pass her on a leaf. The frog stopped for a chat, and with the tip of his hat, he tried to offer some relief. The frog appeared at her side to act as a guide to the dangers lurking in the reef. Meanwhile, back at the shore, sick with worry and with nerves quite raw, Bo's sheep felt left behind as they grazed under a bower, and with each passing hour, they missed their friend more and they pined. They could not conceive how their dear friend could leave, and why her beloved flock she would spurn. The sheep missed her dear, and Hugo again shed a sad tear, and yearned for her to return. Their friend was so admired, And so, they conspired, their companion to search and bring home. They would search all day, and would not delay, no matter how far they did roam. And so, taking matters in hoof and hand, they plotted, jotted, and they planned. And a scheme was quickly hatched. They would go to search for their friend, because they missed Bo no end, and their courage could not be matched. And so, piling quickly into the boat, hoping against hope it will stay afloat, into the loch the boat was cast, but sadly no sheep could row, and they had so far to go. Across the water wide and vast, the sheep rowed so badly, and this meant that sadly, they were going nowhere soon. The boat was bobbing up and down, circling around and around, and Bob got dizzy and did swoon. Oh! It was a sight to be seen. Elliot turned vivid green, and Austin fell overboard and nearly drowned. He was fished out from the drink before he had time to sink, and he sat on the deck and frowned. And as Elliot felt better, his feet were made wetter, as water cascaded all around. But now both sheep must move fast, as daylight would not last, and the sun would soon disappear. Then Doyle had an idea, laid out his plan, plain and clear, as the sheep gathered around him to hear. I will make a great sail, and that will not fail, to help us on our way. We must not delay. Otherwise, here we will stay, going round in circles all day. Then across the loch we will fly, in the blink of an eye, and shout, hip hip hooray. But what for a sail can we use? What item to choose? Asked Doyle as he searched all around the craft. So around the rowboat he did scour, searching for about an hour, until he saw something blowing across the aft. Doyle had spotted Poe's red underwear, which billowed boldly in the air, as Poe was standing in a draft. And a plan in Doyle's head did flicker, as he spotted the red knicker, and he had found his sail at last. And so, nailing the bloomers to the mast, to make up for the time that had passed, the boat flew across the loch so fast. Meanwhile, Bo Peep was far out in the pool, trying hard to remain calm and cool, while still talking to the helpful frog, who tried to tell her of the peril, lurking in that loch, so wild and feral. As he balanced on a log, the water here is none too nice, was the frog's sage advice. Miss Bo Peep, beware of all that lies in this loch. Dear Miss Bo Peep, this promise you must keep. Please turn back and take stock. You must learn to be wiser, cautioned her amphibious adviser. But Bo would not listen to all that he taught her. There will be trouble a-brewing, Just think what you are doing. You will get yourself into deep water." But Bo would not heed his advice, and he could not entice her to hear all the wisdom that he had imparted, and he felt quite distraught when she merely gave a loud snort, stuck her tongue out at him, and departed, because Bo was so vain, and she really could be a pain, and was subject to her pride. But she got quite a fright when she caught onto the sight of an eel who swam up alongside. "No, no, you must do as you feel," said the slippery eel, as it sloped by and slithered onto a rock with a flap of its fins. It gave the most sarcastic of grins, and spoke in a tone intended to mock. It said, being so sly, and with a wink of its eye, "Bo, you should go swim to the middle of the lake. Just think of the cheer you would receive, my dear, and how much courage it will take. Just think of the pride." The eel replied, "Playing his tricks and games, you will be hailed as a queen, and that is how you'll be seen." The eel goaded with the slyest of aims, and Bo fell for his fawning, and would not hear her friend's warning. When the wise frog and the gull returned, and Bo would not hear the warning cries of those deer, and their message was thoroughly spurned. And as she swam, the water did ripple, and her stubbornness did triple. But she was surprised at what an effort it did take, and she was soon out of breath, and completely out of her depth. When the loch began to quiver and quake, there was a rumbling from below, and Bo had nowhere to go. As the monster rose up from the deep, he raised up his large head, and a feeling of dread made Bo wish she had stayed with her sheep. As Bo came close up to Nessie, and thought how things could get messy, as the monster bared its great teeth, she wondered how quickly she could flee, and how it could be that this creature had remained so hidden underneath. She had not heeded the cries, but had bought into the lies, and how she wished she had listened to her friends. She ignored advice that they gave, and her decision felt grave, and she wondered how to make amends. She had not heeded the caution, because she thought it was distortion. She realized she should have listened to their tips, and as she looked Nessie straight in the eyes, she could not disguise. She was worried as she saw him licking his lips, and so Bo decided to swim. But her chances felt slim, and she wondered how fast she could flee. She looked at the scope, and she thought there was not much hope of outswimming the monster Nessie. As she started her trek, she felt Nessie's hot breath on her neck, and her heart gave a small flutter. "But why pick on me? I'm not really tasty," was all she could manage to mutter. And Bo felt so far from the coast, and thought she might end up toast. As she gave a small cough and a splutter, she plunged on through the deep, and her heart gave a leap, and how she regretted smothering herself in butter. As she plowed on in fright, she felt no delight, and she really did not feel like a winner. And as she began to ail, Nessie was close on her tail, and she prayed that he had already had dinner. Bo felt such a wretch, and it was not a stretch to say that she had given up all hope You must plow on Miss Bo, and on you must go, said the crow. I am certain you can cope. But meanwhile, back in the rowing boat, and trying hard to stay afloat, the sheep were looking tired and pale. The strong gusts had turned into a timid breeze, and morale was low by all degrees, with the wind knocked from their sail. The boat had slowed and sprung a leak, and the situation looked quite bleak, and their plan looked doomed to fail. We will give you a tow, and on you must go, said a group of friendly turtles appearing at the bow. And then across the water they hurtled, pulled along by the turtles, and they were soon powering to Bo's aid again now. And Hugo let out a cry, when Bo he did spy, with all the affection for their friend he could emote. And Bo felt such delight, when she caught onto the sight of help arriving in a small boat. And then as Bo climbed safely on board, and with all the speed they could afford, at last they were racing away across Loch Ness. More turtles came to their aid, and short work was made of helping Bo escape from her distress. And so, leaving danger behind, and with the help of friends so kind, Bo escaped from the monster and was free. She arrived home safe and sound, and hugs were shared all around, and all were filled with glee. After an adventure so dire, they warmed themselves by the fire, all armed with cups of tea, and Bo thanked each of her sheep one by one. And under the setting sun, she made a promise to stay at home with her flock, and making an oath to the pack, with a wink and her fingers crossed firmly behind her back, she vowed to stay away from the loch, at least until her next adventure. Goodbye, without a cry, until the next time.